I've been sleeping on Expeditions ROM, and if you also have, now is the time to get on it. The game is actually a lot more RPG than you would expect. The story covers Rome war efforts in a few regions that actually happened historically. There's choices to be made that will affect the ending, there's decent amount of abilities to choose from, and many items to play around with your character builds. I've noticed that under 1% of the people finish the game on insane difficulty, so I decided to make a guide for you guys. Of course, this guide will also be useful for any other difficulty. If it helps you and you appreciate my effort, like and subscribe, it helps a lot. Now let's get right into it. The first few battles will be tough because we don't have skills or gear to play around with. Not to worry though, we can use game mechanics to improve our efficiency. For example, there will be lesser enemies with the untrained effect, which is also represented by the pawn on top of their heads. This means that if you kill them, your action will be refunded, so you can finish off 2 enemies and still use the interrupt skill with your archer. This adds efficiency to your moves and maximize your damage. Another thing to consider is to line up your enemies for your sword swings, which does 50% to the enemy on the square to the left of the target. Also, right from the start, you can start collecting unique items that can be used as is or dismantled and then used as charms to power up other items, giving them special ability. There are guides from other fellow YouTubers and wikis where to obtain all the unique items. If you don't like to spoil your experience in that way, I would recommend just thoroughly explore everywhere and remember to press left alt to highlight everything that's interactable. There will be a lot of chests that are hard to see without it.
There's a dull quality to our footsteps here.
And also, remember to revisit places that you've been. Sometimes things change and other things appear. Now, before we get on some tips for weapon skills and stats, let's look at the upgrades for your Legion Outpost. I haven't played the game in any other difficulty than Insane, but as far as I understand, the enemies have a lot more HP and do a lot more damage compared to the other difficulties. For that reason, it's paramount to spend your strategic resources with highest priority of building Armory, Forge, and then Foundry. Those 3 upgrades correspond to each of the 3 item tiers in the game. You absolutely need the highest tier items as soon as possible. Armory will give you the ability to modify and craft tier 1 items, but also to create tactical items. And tactical items are extremely useful in Insane difficulty. We're talking bandages for healing and throwing spears that break and shut down enemy shield users. The items required for tactical items can be found in chests, looted from enemies, or purchased from merchants in town. For example, the javelin tools for your pilums can be bought from the vendor in the Temple of Apollon right at the start. You can later unlock Greek fire throwables that provide excellent AoE damage for clustered enemies, drinks that provide damage and critical chance buffs, and more. You can get Armory very quickly if you conquer the neighboring region directly to the east in Act 1. There's no time limits on the campaign maps, so explore freely. Loot everything and scout all the resources so you can plan out your outpost upgrades. As mentioned before, the crafting buildings are absolute priority. Then after getting Speculator Tent, I suggest getting the buildings that give you bonus to your Legion strength for conquering new regions, like Stockpile, Depot, and Storehouse. Here's the route I took in Act 1 that was set up for Quick Forge very early Act 2, and by the middle of Act 2 we'll be able to craft tier 3 items and absolutely dominate. Now let's talk about your B team. I would suggest getting the same classes as your main group, so you can easily gear them up with your main's items when you have to do a pacification mission. These can be nasty. If your B team are not geared and also with bad skill choices, which is why I recommend you fill up your roster as soon as possible. This will allow you to allocate their skill points the way you want them. For the social skills, make sure you get Crafty for faster crafting, Scavenger for quicker tactical items, and if you're lucky, score a guy like this one that has also Freeloader, which will give you 1 extra item per job. Architect for researching new stratagems faster, and last but not least, a guy with social trait, with which using the bats will increase the legion's morale, which equals more legion strength. There's no need to really worry too much about legion battles. This aspect of the game is quite easy. Try to keep your legion's morale up. Having commanders with logistics will allow you to gain morale during the battles. Hire 4 commanders because all of their skills count in the battle. Make sure you're not losing on the artillery front because this will give you negative morale and cause you to lose a lot of manpower. Also, reaching high artillery points in the battle will allow you to scatter your enemy army, destroying it for good. Let's talk crafting, modifying and upgrading, and also companion items. Once you unlock the armory, you can dismantle the unique items of your companions and recraft them with better stats. And you can do that for every tier. If you already like the stats on them, you can choose to upgrade them instead. You can save your game before crafting or upgrading, then if you don't like the result, just reload and try again. Remember that you can modify or change 1 stat on every item only. The way you find schematics for weapons and armor, you will also find schematics for different stats for your items, like adding critical damage or piercing damage. You can min-max the bonus values as much as you have patience for it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of RNG involved in the process, so it will be a rare case that you actually got all the stats you want with high value too. I want to mention here that you can use companion item bonuses on your items by modifying your item with the charm that represents your companion's item. However, the original items are character bound. Some of the companion items are really powerful, so make sure you're not sacrificing too much by just using them for their unique ability. Example is Cineros Robes. It gives you like 40% health and around that much in healing, making it an extremely powerful item on Cineros. While still on the topic of companion specific things, your companions have unique abilities on their handbar, which you can access by pressing Q. Cineros, for example, have a healing ability that is very useful, especially before you unlock bandages. In the early game, you cannot reach reliable critical chance, so find or craft swords with the lunge ability. This ability cannot crit, but factors in your critical damage modifiers. It provides great damage throughout the entire game as it scales great with higher tier items. My Valus could one-shot trash enemies even in the end of the game, doing something like 30 to 34 piercing damage. Gladiators, Valus, Principes, they can all use swords. Make use of that ability for sure. For your shield users, lunge combined with defensive strike would be ideal. Defensive strike will allow you to do some damage and guarantee a deflection. Both of those are also tier 1 skills, so you can take advantage of it right away. Use bows with DOT effects, as those shots have the same base power but also benefit from damage over time. Fire arrow can ignite oil and set people on fire. Backstab for daggers is worth mentioning because it does 100% damage on enemies if they're flanked. Also remember that flanked enemies lose their resistances, so you can avoid glancing blows. As you unlock higher item tiers, all weapons will have more skills, so play around with them and see what fits your game style. Let me know in the comments which skills and synergies are your favorite. I want to remind you that in Expeditions Rome, main hand and offhand weapons have different stats, so feel free to roll critical damage for your sword main hand and critical chance on your dagger, for example. To make use of your weapon skills efficiently, also keep in mind that stats from your amulet will affect both your weapons. In my playthrough, I used Vela's main. She turned out monstrous, killing nearly every encounter in her first turn since around the beginning of Act 2. Let me know in the comments if you want me to make a build guide for Veles. If you have any questions, also hit me up in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe and share. I'll see you in the next one. Hex out.